if you're out there and you're successful, I mean, I've heard this so many times. How many people have said this to me, researchers and stuff like that, or of me, not necessarily to me, no. If you were genuine, you'd be dead, right? And it's like, whoa, now that's taken giving your power away to a whole new extremes of existence. So, this world is so controlled and we are so impotent to do anything about it that your only confirmation that you are genuine is if they kill you. This is like the medieval drowning of alleged witches. They put you in the ducking stool, and if when they put you under the water you drowned, you were not a witch. If you don't drown, you are a witch, and they kill you. I mean, it's a joke. I mean, we should be celebrating people who are successful in breaking through the system. Not, well, he's successful in breaking the system. He's got to be part of this. Oh, please. But this is a much wider area, and very, very important. I was reading a detailed account of writings, texts that were found in Egypt. I think it was in 1945. Nag Hammadi, I don't know the exact pronunciation, it was very close to that. It was the place where they were found. And they were writings from people known as Gnostics. And funnily enough, very early on in this story of mine, right in the early 90s, one of the first things I came across after, I became clear that there was something going on, were the Gnostics and people like the Cathars. And the Gnostics, like those that ran the great library at Alexandria, and the Cathars, were invariably slaughtered by the system in all its forms, not least Christianity. And their writings destroyed. But these writings were, and texts were found in Egypt in 1945. And I've been reading detailed accounts of what they say. It is fascinating. And it was in many ways like reading my books. When you look at them, it's clear that things like the New Testament were Gnostic writings to a large extent, that have been censored, that have been changed around, and where the symbolic has been delivered as the literal, which has kind of caught everyone out, that follows the religion. But something like a fifth of these writings talk about something called the archons. And the archons were clearly perceived as a non-human force that operated outside the realms of human sight. And when you look around the world, you see the recurring theme. In the Zulu tradition, they're called the Chitahuri. In the Islamic tradition, they're called the Jinn. And so it's the same thing under different names. Then they'll talk about these archons. And there were so many concepts that they talked about that absolutely mirror what I've uncovered myself over these years. And one thing they talk about is that the archons are terrified of humans because humans have the ability for creativity, they have the ability for expansion of consciousness, whereas the archons do not have the ability to create. They have to mimic that which is already created. And they are devious manipulators of reality. But the reality has to exist before they can piggyback it and manipulate it. And they talk in their own way about the fact that the archons created, in effect, a fake reality, which we are decoding, humans were decoding, believing it to be real. All these themes, it's like, I talked about the pieces in the puzzle. One of the things that happens to me in this process is that stuff is held back. It's happened a number of times that I could easily have come across until a certain point, and then suddenly I come across it, and it's at that exact point, really, often exact point, that says to you, see, it's right. And so I'm reading this stuff about the archons and the way they manipulate and the way they possess the minds of humanity, and this theme comes up again, that they are, compared with humans and human potential, extraordinarily limited, and therefore they have to piggyback humanity, and they're terrified of humans awakening to that's going on, to their existence, because then the game's up. And so I have this image in my talks where I put a reptilian face in a box, and then I put a humanity in a smaller box, and that's the situation. The only way that these archons, reptilians, whatever name you want to use, can control humanity is doing it A, covertly, and B, putting humans in a smaller box than they're in. We have this, and by box I mean perception of reality and self. And we have this phrase, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Well, the archon reptilians are the one-eyed man, and they've made humans blind so that they're king in this reality while we're blind. And so this awakening that we are now experiencing among incredibly expanding numbers of people is their worst nightmare, because we are breaking out of the box, and it's a box that we've been put in, and once we break out of it, we break beyond their box, if you like, and they become impotent in terms of their control of us. And this is why I've been saying for years now that it is not a coincidence that at the very same time that this awakening is happening, on the other side we are having this almost like panic speed imposition of the global Orwellian state, and surveillance, control. They want microchipping, and they're bombarding us with radiation to destabilize us, with food and drink additives to destabilize us electrochemically and all the rest of it. It's because, while it seems on the surface that this is an attempt for more and more control, it is in a way, but they're in a different game now. And they knew, if I knew 22 years ago this was coming, how long have they known? And they've been preparing for it. And thus, the old way of control, which is for thousands of years, religion, all this thing, and people just not thinking and going through their lives, I know my place, and I believe what the religion tells me, and all that stuff. That's fine. Controlling people in that mode has been easy, but they're in a different game now. They're in a different game where these truth vibrations are impacting ever more powerfully on more and more people, and thus the way they controlled humanity before is not enough. That's why this explosion of Orwellian control is flying in now, and has been for some time. It's because it is a defense mechanism to try to mitigate and overcome the consequences for them of the human awakening.
Do you think, as before we were saying, that if people were able to control their own genetics, they would be able to create their own reality? and starting to live their own lives, not manipulated by.
Oh, of course. I mean, this is where what people miss when they say if he was genuine, he'd be dead. It's the fact that the way out of this is to open ourselves to that level of awareness, thus potential to dictate our own reality, that has been kept from us. And when we do that, especially in together with forces that, I mean, the forces that contacted me 22 years ago, they're not sitting on Orion in a deck chair, on the beach. They have been working all the way through these 22 years, and they are just an expression of a much greater operation, if you like, that has been created, is happening to remove this human control and human suppression. Thus, this combination of people opening to a greater awareness themselves and connecting and being influenced by this even greater awareness that is benevolently trying to help humanity out of this, that means that the more we do this, the more power this reptilian or conic energy or force, whatever you want to call it, the less influence and power it's having over us. And there's this old phrase about a duck going across the water and it looks very calm, but underneath the water it's flapping like crazy. Well, we see this arrogant kind of control system, but under the water it's flapping like crazy because it's almost, in its eyes, it's a race to get this world locked down, to get people microchipped, externally controlled, and their vibrational state externally suppressed, to get this lockdown of humanity technologically and in other ways before enough people have awakened to bring their house of cards down. So it's like you've got the irresistible force, which is this awakening and the information change that is triggering the awakening. And you've got what thinks it's the immovable object, the control system, but ain't. And this is desperately trying to defend itself with all this stuff that's happening, all this Orwellian stuff, from this. And at the moment, we're in this cusp where both forces, if you like, are at work. And so you can see people who are going that way and people who are going that way. And it's all kind of chaotic and all the rest of it. But there's going to come a point, because this vibrational change is cumulative. This thing about 2012 and all great chat, I don't buy that at all. 2012's greatest significance is it's not 2011, but it's not 2013, 2014. And there comes a point where a tipping point where the impact of this new energetic construct and its influence on humans to awaken from the box is such that the control system comes down. Because it's my view that, say you're hacking to a computer and that hack has a code. It's a code that hacks into the computer. Well, if you can unravel that code, the hack's gone, and suddenly the computer, the range that you can access on your computer dramatically increases. I'm absolutely convinced that there is an energetic code, probably a harmonic code, which when we find it, and we will, is going to break the hack. And when that happens, it's going to be like Sleeping Beauty woke up. Humans. It's going to be like, what just happened? What just happened?
When do you think it's going to happen?
Well, before I leave this place, I hope. That's the idea. But we'll see.
2012?
Well, no, I don't see it. I think myself that by 2016, 2017, I'm not saying that's another 2012 year, but by 2016, 2017, when you see how many people are awakening now, and even more important to me, the kind of people that are awakening now, who you'd never thought would do so, what is going to be the impact on human perception of self and reality by 2016, 2017? I think, you know, by then we'll really start to see this control system start to quite blatantly unravel. But I think, you know, in the next little while, it's going to seem as if it's going on and on and on in its fascist way. And another one of the themes of the last 22 years, almost right from the start really, is that just when it seems the control system has got all the aces, all the answers, it suddenly comes down so fast that people will be shocked at the speed. And when you go back from the holographic in this world, this limited world where we see everything in limited terms, and you go back to the vibrational harmonic information construct, when that changes, this changes. And if this changes fast, that must change fast, because this is just a projection of that. And what they've done, this reptilian archonic energy, and it goes beyond that into, like I say, in the realms of no form. They have created a distortion in the information construct of this part of our universe. They have created a distortion, and the distortion comes through to the holographic world as a distortion in human emotions, a distortion in human perception, a distortion in the violence in the world, a distortion in the fact that everyone, you know, vast majority of people are trying to just walk over other people, a distortion in the way we see ourselves, a distortion in the way we see reality. And it's like I call it the schism. And that is the energetic foundation of the control system. That is why the control system has no problem sacrificing children, abusing children, having people starve in a world of plenty, have wars galore, and economic catastrophes that affect fundamentally, negatively, the lives of millions and multi-millions. That is the distortion played through as a distortion. I mean, what more distortion can you have in your perception of how to live life than to coldly engineer a global economic collapse in 2008, which has had catastrophic effects on people all over the world? That is an expression of the distortion. Banks that hoard all the money, and then when they get in trouble, people bail them out, and then the people then have to go into austerity bloody situations because of the financial implications of bailing these what more definition of a distortion can you have? So that's why the world is as it is. What these truth vibrations are doing, and what this, I say, harmonic key or code is, it's going to break the distortion. It's going to be like, what I'm seeing as I'm talking to you is a piece of rubber that has been distorted, right? And then something happens, distortion gone. When the distortion's gone, its holographic expression must go, which is the control system. And that, I feel, I mean, you know, obviously it is deeper than that. I'm using symbolism and all that stuff here. But in theme, that is why I feel that there has been this constant theme in my life through 22 years at different points. Just when the control system looks like it's got all the answers and in complete control, it's going to come down so fast, people are going to be shocked.
What the control agenda has planned for the 21st of December of 2000?
Well, you know, I think 2012 is massively overblown, overhyped. But when you have certain beliefs in something like a year, well, those things can be then manipulated by the control system to make you think they're happening, because maybe that in some ways is what we'll see, because what they want is people in states of fear, anxiety, because when you're in a state of fear and anxiety, people even use this phrase, oh God, I feel so heavy today. And the heaviness they're feeling in their anxiety and their depression and their fear is because those emotional states, again, software, pull the energetic field into low vibrational states. And when you come into low vibrational states, I feel so heavy, you are not going to be connecting to high vibrational states, greater expansions of awareness and consciousness. And that's another interesting thing while I'm talking about it. Another totally common theme that you find, and I found through the years, is that these reptilians, archons outside of human sight, they feed off human energy. That's their food, that's their sustenance, that's their power source in so many ways. They're like energy vampires. But of course, if you're going to absorb energy, you have to absorb energy that is vibrating within your frequency range, or like 2 radio stations, it's going to go through. So, one of the key things that they've done in this software program, I say they've put into human genetics, way back, is human emotion, but human low vibrational emotion, fear, anxiety, guilt, frustration, anger, fury, hatred, all these things. Because if they put them in the software and human experience triggers the software, or the software triggers the emotion, then they've turned humans, as Morpheus said about the machines in the Matrix when he held up a battery, and he said, they've turned humans into one of these. Well, they've turned humans into, through this software which is running these emotional reactions through as responses, they've turned humans into batteries, generators, power stations of the very low vibrational emotional energy that these entities feed off. And so whether it's a conflict between individuals, or whether it's a war or whatever, the emotional reaction to those things and the emotional responses are generating the very energy they want. So we've come a long way from there are a few greedy families in the world that want to control all the money. That's just the outer expression of it. This is so deep, and only by understanding how deep it is are we going to bring an end to it. And these are the areas I would suggest that this control force is terrified of humans becoming aware of. And really, and it's a good thing, really, comforting, half the people of the world don't have to awaken to bring this to an end. It's interesting when you look at research that has been done into the power of heart energy and associated things through organizations like this HeartMath Institute in America, where they found that the heart energy is the most powerful electromagnetic field in the body. But more than that, they found that emotions like love, appreciation, caring are thousands and thousands of times more energetically powerful than things like hatred and all these low vibrational emotions I've been talking about. So once a certain percentage of the population moves into those states of being, nothing even approaching half the population, to switch the energetic dominant force, if you like, from that which is we've had to that which is coming.
You have written that aliens use technology to travel along our time to manipulate our reality or perception of our history. What is your perception of timelines or time deception?
Well, my feeling is that our perception of time is certainly among, if not the greatest form of locking us into this fake reality. you talk to virtually anyone who's had a serious out-of-body experience, or near-death experiences that they're called, and they'll tell you that their relationship to time dramatically changed when they left the body. That past, present, and future all came together in the same moment. And people who've been into deep states of meditation have experienced the same. There is no time. There is only one infinite now. And what this hack has done, and a major part of this hack, has been to project this information field, this hack into the information field that carries the information of what we call time. So time, as we perceive it, one thing following another in a sequence, in effect, is the way that we decode this hacked information. The left side of the brain does it massively. It takes information from the now and it puts it into a sequence. This is why, Einstein, used to say that time was relative, because, to paraphrase him, if you put your hand in boiling water, time seems to pass very slowly. But as he put it, if you're in the company of a beautiful woman, then time seems to pass very quickly, because it's relative. When you're in a situation that you don't really want to be in, then your decoding system, particularly in the left side of the brain, puts this sequence, constructs this sequence in a way that moves slowly, or appears to move slowly. When you're doing something you really love, then this sequence is put into to move quickly in the way that we experience it. So time is completely relative. I mean, we have an invisible line in the middle of the ocean, and if you go that way across it, you go into yesterday, and that way you go into tomorrow, and it's like, it's crazy. I mean, this is crazy. It's all manufactured, and thus, when your greater awareness, your greater consciousness is operating in a state of no time now, the infinite now, but that which is experiencing this reality has got caught into this illusory sequence that we call time, then already they're in different realms of or states of being, which is already disconnecting the influence of one over the other, because they're in different realms. This is in the now, this is in time. And it's fascinating to me too when I look at Saturn, and how Saturn and the moon, clearly, which I say are part of this hack, are so connected to our perception of time. See, the Romans, they worshipped, their major god was Saturn. They used to have a festival every year in the period running up to our Christmas called Saturnalia, where they had put trees up in their homes and decorated them and handed out gifts. It was our Christmas. And they worshipped Saturn. And the Greek god of Saturn, the Greek name for the god of Saturn, was Kronos. And Kronos is where we get Father Time from. Kronos is where we get the Grim Reaper from, because Kronos was portrayed with the scythe, with the sickle or scythe, and so time and Saturn and the moon are fundamentally connected, and I feel that this hack in so many ways has created this illusion of time that keeps us from the infinite realm of no time, or from connecting with it in a way that it will influence us. It's a big part of the control system, what we call time. And because we're so welded to it, and I completely understand it, we find it very difficult to perceive anything that could not have time sequence as we know it. But when I look at the now and all that stuff, and what we perceive as time, if I put a DVD, a movie, into that television there, and it started to play, after I've watched it for a while, the scenes that I've watched in the movie would be my perception of the past. The scene I'm watching will be my perception of the present, and the scenes I've yet to watch are my perception from here of the future. And yet all those scenes, past, my perception of present, and future, all exist on the disc in their entirety at the same time. The question is, where on that disc am I watching at any point? Because that's my reference point. That's my now. That's my present. Everything past, everything gone before, everything still to come, past and future. But it's just all there at the same time, in the same disc, the same now, before you've watched the first scene. You know, time is not what we think it is, but it is a massive, massive way of enslaving us in a perception prison.
Do you think we exist simultaneously in different time zones?
Definitely. You know, in the end, everything is one. Thus, everything exists infinitely. And of course, there are different expressions of this infinite. This one's called David Icke, but connected to what's called David Icke, going into other realms of reality, out into the great infinity, are other levels of the infinite one and other levels of me that are not called David Icke. This is just the expression of this multi-level consciousness that is having this experience here in this reality, but we operate over multiple realities. And what the hack, the control system has done, from the knowledge of how to do this, which these reptilian archonic kind of entities do, is their idea is to isolate this expression of this infinite awareness from higher, more expansive levels of it, and to get this level to see itself in isolation. Little me, I am my name, my job, and all the rest of it. Because then they got you. Because then they've got you in a smaller box than they're in, and the one-eyed man is king. This awakening is taking us beyond this to see that this is just what it is. In fact, it's just a point of observation. That's all. You move your point of observation, you're suddenly not David Icke in its entirety. That's what you are. You are consciousness having an experience that someone called David Icke. And already your point of observation has changed. The idea of the control system is to pull our point of observation into five-sense reality alone. And you look at the world, you look at society, you look at the way it's structured, and it's all about enticing the five senses. Look at this, smell this, feel this, you know, listen to this. It's all pulling us into the five-sense level of decoding reality, which is and one of the great pollutions that is being imposed upon us more and more is sound pollution. Sound pollution. Don't give people the chance to have silence as much as you can. Pull them in. Get them to put the telly on. Get in the car. Put the radio on. Kill the silence. Because when you go into the silence, you go into the all that is. Because people think that silence is nothing. What can you hear? Nothing. You can hear everything. Because within that silence is all possibility waiting to manifest. So if I'm talking now and killing the silence, what I'm doing is I'm pulling one possibility out of all possibility, the silence. And then when I stop talking, it's back again. And so what we're doing is pulling possibilities out. We call it form, we call it manifestation. But in the silence and the stillness, which I've experienced in other states of consciousness, that's where everything exists. Some people call it the void. I don't like the name the void because it gives the impression of nothingness when it's everythingness. It's all possibility. Within that stillness and silence is All that is, has been, and ever can be. Because when you hear people say these phrases through your life. Oh, it's all that is, can be, and ever. And you think, before you kind of wake up, you think, well, what do you mean? It's all that is and ever can be. It's ridiculous. How can that? All possibility. All possibility must be all that is, can be, and ever can be. It wouldn't be all possibility. So then you start looking at you're looking at these paradoxes that aren't paradoxes. So you say, within this is everything and nothing. You can't have everything and nothing. You've got to be one or the other. Well, you have in this world, yeah, because that's the way we perceive it. But within all possibility, everything and nothing has to exist, or it's not all possibility. Everywhere and nowhere has to exist within all possibility. This is where it all comes from. This infinite possibility that people call the infinite, the all that is, and all whatever. And we're just experiencing a tiny fraction of possibility from within all possibility. And the more we're isolated into the fraction of possibility, the more the few can control us, and they do, but not for much longer.
It breeds into reviewing what proportion of the population of the planet do you think is real human 100%?
Another great question, not least because my thoughts have been going this way for a while. I think this is very significant. I can't put a figure on it, but a very, very significant number of people that we call humans are actually biological robots. And it's interesting when you look at where within our desperately limited science, within the public arena that we can see, when you see how far they're now going with robotics. I mean, I saw one the other day, somebody sent me, and you knew it was a robot, but you sure as heck could see where it was going, in terms of it not being a million miles in terms of advancement from you not realizing it's a robot. And then you go beyond the public arena and you go into the underground bases and the secret projects, which are light years ahead of the technological development within the public arena. And then you go beyond that into the realms of these entities that understand reality better than we do because they put us in a box smaller than them in terms of that. And you start to appreciate, especially when you're looking at holographic inserts and stuff like that, where you can see that it is very possible at their level of knowledge to create apparent human beings that are just biological robots, biological computers. But when you think of robots, oh, I am a robot or a computer, no, that's just a word to give the theme of what I'm talking about. We're talking about dramatic advances on that. I mean, if the human body, and I suggest it is a human body mind, the lower mind is a biological computer, then which is animated by consciousness, then why can't you have a biological computer that is animated by some other force, like some program? And like I've said earlier in this chat, that I say this is a software program running through all human bodies, and I do feel that there are a very significant number of people in this world that we call human that are not attached to consciousness, shall we say. They are purely biological software playing through, and not something that we would call human in our perception of human.
Can we distinguish them from real human? Is there any sign?
Well, I think when you are connected to any form of consciousness, then especially any expanded consciousness, then there's a sparkle in the eye. There's life. You feel life coming off people. And you know, I've noticed over the years that some people have what we call good vibes, some people have what we call bad vibes or negative vibes, but there are a certain group that have no vibes. It's like they're dead. It's like a dead zone, and that could quite possibly be it. But see, the thing is that one of the greatest forms of mass control is to suppress their sense of what is possible. This is really so important. If you have this view of what's possible, then you have this spectrum of possibility to explain, look at, research what's happening in the world and how it's happening and what's being done to make it happen. If you are given this and you accept it, this amount of perception of what is possible, then when some people come along and say this is happening and this is happening, you're going, that's impossible, you can't do that, it's impossible. No, you've been led to believe it's not possible. And people dismiss things, and now suddenly, to explain what's happening in the world and how it's being made to happen, you now have that to explain it. And that's why there are so many mysteries in the world, because there's very little you can explain about the wider happenings in the world from that perception of what's possible. But once you do that, now you can see not only what's happening, you can see how it's being made to happen. And so they work very, very hard on suppressing the human perception of what's possible. And that's why you see, I mean, a number of people that have laughed in my face at things that are provable fact in terms of what's technically logically possible. But because they don't know that, they laugh at it, even though you can say, look at it, there it is, it's happening. And suppression of the possible is very, very fundamental to the control. And this is where education comes in. This is why they control the education system, and it's not an education system, it's a programming machine, a programming and a suppression of perception machine. That's what it is, and that's why they do it. I mean, the suppression of the sense of the possible happens from the earliest age when you enter the education system.
Have you personally met any reptilian, draconian creators? Have you seen it with your own eyes in any occasion? Have you felt the presence? Have you felt the presence of one of these entities?
What I work with a lot is feeling energy, and it's like everything. The more you become sensitive to energy, the more you feel different vibrational fields in different situations, where when you're desensitized from that, which most people are because that's what they're manipulated to be, then everything becomes basically one energy field in effect. And sometimes if it's extreme kind of negativity, you might go into a house where, like an old house where there's been a lot of really horrible things going on, which has impacted upon the energy field, and you go into the house or whatever and you go, oh God, I don't like it in here, it's horrible. What do we say? The atmosphere is horrible. What is atmosphere? It is energy generated by people. And not only that, it's energy generated by entities operating out of human sight, which also impact upon our energy field. And there is a certain vibrational field which I feel coming off people, which I say myself is what I call reptilian, what other people call archonic or whatever. It's a certain energy, and there's something in the eyes. And again, it's like people talk about the eyes being the window on the soul. Well, they are. They are, in the sense that the eyes take you through into another level of someone, and through the eyes you can see what they are in so many ways. And as with the dead eyes that I talk about, which I think are biological robots, so with the reptilians, it's an atmosphere, it's an energy, because you know, you can it's why becoming sensitive to this is so important, because you can manipulate people with words, you can manipulate people with smiley faces, but you cannot hide your energy field, right? You can put the front on, you cannot hide your energy field. And one of the things that I've noticed, again with the eyes, is when I look at these people, which I would say are absolutely reptilian, people like Tony Blair and Hillary Clinton and others that of the same kind of ilk. What do you call it?
Gordon Brown,
yeah, what do you call it? Barack Obama. No matter what their face is doing, smiling, happy, slappy, their eyes don't change. There's this cold stare in their eyes, which whatever their face is doing, that never changes. I say that's this reptilian archon force as well.
What do you think about this idea that people are believing more and more about that in a couple of years, 2012 or 2014, the Earth is going to split into the new Earth are going to stay in people who are going to have a certain type of vibration, and on the old Earth are going to stay the old paradigm people or something like that. Do you see anything about this?
Well, you know, I would only say this, that we exist in the frequency range that we are ourselves in. Thus, I can in this level exist in this frequency range. If my frequency range changes, then I move into another frequency range. And thus, well, I'm not saying there will be, but I'm just talking in terms of the concept. Excuse me. If there was a massive shift in the human vibrational field, then it would have to perceive another vibrational field. Because if you're tuned to radio 1, you don't experience radio 2. And if you are attached to, say, radio 1, and there's not a massive shift in your energy field, then you're going to stay attached to radio 1. So, in principle, that I can see the energetic frequency direction from where they're coming from. That if there's an energetic shift, then there must be a parting of the ways in which, in terms of what those two states of being are experiencing. So, energetically, it's possible, but whether it will be or not, I don't know. It's I mean, the thing is that we as humans have been kept so ignorant of reality and the fluid nature of reality that anything's possible when you
think it's possible.
But anything's possible. Whether it will happen or not is another thing, but anything's possible once you realize how fluid reality is and how your perception becomes your reality and all that stuff. And we've been kept in this tiny little box of ignorance about it that, you know, we're still feeling our way. Even people who have really started to open to this are still feeling our way in terms of seeing the true nature of what we're experiencing rather than what we thought we've been experiencing all our lives, and what everyone around us continues to tell us we're experiencing because that's all they can perceive. You know, this is a real time of transition, and we've got some extraordinary surprises and revelations to come. And I said in a book years ago, you know, I think that when we finally, you know, do realize what reality is and what we've been experiencing and the way we perceive the experience as opposed to what we've been experiencing, then I think we're going to laugh for weeks and weeks at the way we've perceived what we're experiencing from the perspective of when we know what's really going on. It's going to be so funny. You know, we believe that. Oh my God. And you ate that sandwich and you thought it was, oh my God. This is where we're going. And it's a great adventure because no matter what happens and the emotional experiences we have, we are all it is, has been, and ever can be. That's the worst it gets. So, whatever is happening is always temporary.
You have written also about the moon as a very important factor in this holographic reality. Can you say some words about it?
Yes, well, in fact, it actually goes off from what I've just been talking about. We have been given such a false version of everything that what I suggest we need is what I call the blank sheet of paper, where we put aside all preconceived idea of what we believe about anything, and we get the blank sheet of paper. Now we're going to look at everything afresh, and it's going to justify its place on the paper, in other words, our perception of reality, based on information, intuitive knowing, all these things, instead of what someone has already told us, parents, teachers, journalists, scientists, that we should believe about something. And one of the things you find, very common theme, is when you take so-called scientific fact and you chart it back to its origin, you find that it's not fact at all. It's a theory, an assumption that's been perceived as fact by constant repetition. So what happened to me, so in terms of scientific, this is how things are, I don't accept that. Blank sheet of paper, it might be true, but it's got to justify itself to me. I'm not just accepting it because you're telling me. And one of the sequences that started after the Betty Shine meetings was that I would get an insight out of nowhere, and from that moment, and it might be a strange thing, like, what? And from that moment, information starts coming into my life, and people and what have you, personal experiences relating to that insight, which basically saying, see, the insight was right, look. And these are the pieces of the puzzle being given to me, which is why I say, if it was left to the David Icke level of me, I wouldn't have been anywhere near, what I'm doing now. And so I went into that office we were in earlier, and I sat down one morning when I was writing a book called Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. And when I sat down, this voice, a strong thought form, went through my head out of nowhere. Worse to the effect of, the moon's not real, the moon's not what you think it is. Now most people will go, oh, what? No, come on, carry on with your day. But because I've been through it so often over 20 years, 20 years by then, I thought I'll go with this. So I then put into NetFind, search engine, combination of words that the moon is not natural. And up came immediately a book called Who Built the Moon by two researchers, I'd not come across it before, who were looking at the facts about the moon, the incredible anomalies about the moon, and the extraordinary mathematical connections between the moon, the earth, and the sun. And their conclusion, with evidence, was that the moon had to be some kind of construct. And I'd thought about this in the past every now and again, but then it was just fleeting and you got on with your life. But now it was time to focus on this. And the bits and then the puzzle pieces came in, and I put this thing together. And I didn't realize that until I started doing that two Russian scientists from the Soviet Academy of Scientists in 1970 wrote a detailed article basically asking the question, is the moon some form of extraterrestrial spacecraft? And again, the longer we talk everything kind of connects to everything else. I mentioned earlier that one of the greatest ways of suppressing human perception is to suppress the perception of the possible. And if we're going to understand what's happening to us, we have got to redefine our perception of what is technologically possible, and what is possible in terms of holographic projection, which can project things in ways that look absolutely solid and real. I mean, you can interact with them in that way, come to that. And because of the suppression of our sense of the possible, things like the moon not being a natural body is, like, to most people, it's ridiculous, because they can't conceive that it's possible. But we, because of the suppression, have been living in the technological Stone Age. And thus, what's happening around us, which is technologically massively more advanced than we think is possible, is happening without people questioning it, because we couldn't perceive there's anything to question. It's got to be real. And I say this, imagine back in the Stone Age, when there's this guy sitting there and he's knocking rocks together, and another guy comes over to him in the Stone Age, points to the moon and says, you know, it's possible to build something that flies like a bird right up to that moon. And he's knocking rocks together. That's his perception of the possible. So the idea that that is possible, ludicrous. You know, you've been on the mammoth juice, right? But even though to Stone Age people that was impossible, clearly it is possible, but only when you know how. And thus when people look at the moon, and I think other bodies too, and they say that no one could have constructed that, or at least hollowed out some natural type body and if you like, reconstructed it, they can't think it's possible, but it is. And when you look at the moon and you look at the anomalies, it's quite clear that it's not a natural body. It's either a completely unnatural body, or it has been, as these Russian scientists postulated, it's somehow some kind of hollowed out planetoid. I mean, look at it. Look at the size of the Earth and look at the size of the moon. It's massive. It shouldn't be there. And there are tribes that are still in existence that talk about the fact that their tribe goes back so far that it was before the moon was in the sky. And it's a thing that we, again, when we come out of the womb into this world, we tend to accept that what's here has always been here. But it isn't. I mean, I go into this in Remember Who You Are in some detail. Even the solar system that we see now has not been like that for that long in geological terms. And then when you, and I go into this in the book as well, because of an experience I had as a kid, then we can ask another question. Again, we're coming back to this blank sheet of paper. Is what we see out there, is it really there? Or is it some kind of holographic projection that we are decoding? Because we are taking waveform information, vibrational information fields, and we're decoding them into holographic reality. Therefore, we look into the great beyond and we see this vastness of space and the stars all that time away. But the only place they exist in that holographic so-called physical state that we're perceiving is in our decoding system. So there is actually the distances we perceive that everything is apart from everything else is merely that which we are decoding to be like that. So is it really there, or is it a projection? These are the things that we need to start asking and questioning on the blank sheet of paper, because all bets are off. You see, I tell this story in the new book. I was brought up in a place called Leicester in the Midlands of England. I think, let's say we didn't have much money. I was brought up in the 50s and the early 60s as a kid, and most of the 60s. We were, I remember going around the back of the factory where my father worked with my mother on a Thursday lunchtime, so he could hand that week's wage packet to her so we could eat that night. That's how hand to mouth it was. So we didn't go places. We rarely went on holiday. When we did, we came to the Isle of Wight, which is why I fell in love with it and why I'm here now. But one day, out of the blue, my father, I was a little kid, it must have been about late 50s, maybe 58, 59. And he announces we're going to London on the train, the whole family. And it's like, we don't do that. But we went, and I can still see it now. I can see this picture of all these legs, this vast crowd of people trying to get a ticket on the train. Going on a steam train, I went to London. Now, in my entire knowledge of my father, he never once mentioned the word astronomy or talked about the heavens in any way, shape or form. We get to London and he takes us to the planetarium, right? I didn't know what a planetarium was. It was next to Madame Tussauds in Baker Street, which is, it's not there, the building's there now, but it's not a planetarium anymore, I understand. So I go into this planetarium. It's all kind of new, because we're talking late 50s, and the London Planetarium, which we went to, actually opened in 58, so maybe that's why we went, because it was so new. Anyway, I'm sitting there, a little kid, if it was 58, 59, I'd be, 6 or 7. And I'm looking around thinking, what's going to happen? And there's this contraption in there, and this darkness in the sky, and then the show starts. And it's midday, it must have been midday, something like that. And suddenly, I'm sitting there, and the night sky is above my head. And the stars were moving. And the stars looked like they looked when I look up as a kid at night. And there are times in your life when something hits you. It really smacks you and you don't forget it. That was one of my moments. It impacted that moment when I saw the heavens on that dome ceiling of the London Planetarium in the late 50s. It imprinted something on me, which I've never forgotten. And the last couple of years I was out in the countryside, about 2 or 3 miles from here, just sitting on a bench, and I just looked up. And when I looked up, it was daytime. I saw the sky as a gigantic dome, and I thought, is this real? Is this a projection? Like the planetarium, it came back to me. That story came back to me when I had that experience. And then a friend of mine, Neil Haig, who does artwork for my books, I was talking to him about this. He said, have you seen that movie, The Truman Show? And I hadn't. It had been out a long time, but I got it on DVD when he mentioned it, and I watched it here. For people that haven't seen The Truman Show, it starred Jim Carrey, and he was born on the set of a soap program, but he didn't know that. So he's growing up thinking this is real in life, and his mother's his mother and his girlfriends, and they're all bloody actors. And every time he tries to get out of this little town, this set as it turned out to be, something stopped him. And he started to get, in the end, suspicious what's going on. And cut a long story short, eventually he gets on this boat, which he thinks is going out to the open ocean, and he goes out, and he goes out, and he goes out, and eventually he comes to the wall of this massive freaking dome, in which it's all been going on in. And then he walks up the edge of the dome and out the door of the dome into the world as it really is. And whoa, that hit me like a train when I watched that. I thought, that's it. Vibrationally, holographically, in terms of projections that we decode, that is our situation. And then, this soap show, The Truman Show, which everyone was watching, the only person didn't realize was him, that it was all a big act. The operations center, where it was all manipulated from, looked like the moon. And I think that whoever wrote The Truman Show got seriously bloody lucky, or had some idea what he was writing about symbolically. And I'm saying that Saturn is part of that process. That the way it seems to me is Saturn is the main projector of this fake reality. And then you look at Saturn and you say, anything's possible. What's real anymore? And the moon is amplifying that and focusing on the Earth particularly. So we get a much more amplified version of it. Therefore, much more powerful fake reality. And people talk about, insiders have talked about bases on the dark side of the moon that they've seen in pictures, and NASA, they talk about domes and buildings and strange non-natural artifacts or buildings and structures on the moon, not just on the far side, that's where most of them are, obviously. And isn't it funny, we only see one side of the moon. Hey, just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. But there are some you can point out on the near side of the moon as well. But I'm saying, so I have no problem that all that is correct. But I'm saying that it's inside the moon where the real deal is, and that's what the Russian scientists was saying in 1970, that it actually goes on inside the moon. That's where the whole thing comes from. And it was another kind of common theme through my life in the last 22 years, and the puzzle pieces being given to me, is that when I've gone public with something that's kind of bizarre and out there, something comes along that says, hey, see, you were right to go there. Look, hey, it's like a confirmation. And about 9 months after Human Race came out, I had an email from a lady in Brazil, I think it was. And she said, I read your book about the moon. Have you read a book called Earth by a lady called Barbara Marciniak? I met Barbara years ago. And she's what they call a channel. She, like a psychic like Betty Shine, they will hear something and then they will report what they've heard. But people haven't come across this. What a channel is someone that literally just allows their body computer, I would say, to be taken over by a projected electromagnetic field, and they just speak the words. Basically, their body's in many ways taken over, and they allow it to be. So Barbara Marciniak is one of these channels, and she produced books in the 90s called Earth and Bringers of the Dawn, a great book, I thought, which are literally what came out of her mouth when she was in this channel mode. And she says that she was channeling some consciousness connected to the Pleiades. Anyway, I'd not read Earth, and so she gave me some page numbers, this email, and said, I think it'd be a good idea if you read it. And I sent for it, and it came within a few days, and I went through the page numbers. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The book came out in the mid-90s, and in the middle of all this other stuff about many other different subjects was this stuff about what she kind of channeled, that the moon was not real. It was a construct. It was an eye in the sky, or basically a computer system that was manipulating and dictating human perception on Earth, and that it was not possible for humans in effect to be truly free until A, they can break out of the influence of what's coming from the moon, or the moon is taken over by forces that have a benevolent agenda for humanity. Because at the moment, it was saying at the time it was written anyway, the time it was published, that that was not the case. And you know, when I was reading that, after publishing 9 months earlier, this Human Race Get Off Your Knees, it was saying basically the same thing. You know, that was a, you know, because you put it out there, and that's something. It's always nice when these confirmations come like that. And again, I know it's hard for people, completely understand, for them in large numbers to perceive or conceive that life on Earth is being manipulated from the moon by non-human entities, but it is, and but it won't be for that much longer.
I have one last question, and of course it is related to chemtrails. Chemtrails, why?
Well, I think there's, in virtually every instance and every facet of this control agenda, there's multi-reasons for most things that they do, not just one. There's a main reason, but then there's others. First of all, they have an agenda for the mass culling of the human population. I go into this in Remember Who You Are, and how they're planning to do it and how they are in the process of doing it. And so one aspect of the chemtrails is that they come down, we breathe them in, and it does us a lot of damage in terms of health. And this disease called Magellan's disease, where these fibers, these technological fibers coming out of people's bodies, and no matter how many you pull them out, they're just there. It's like they're growing, you know. And that, I am absolutely convinced, is from chemtrails, because they started about the same time as each other. And my feeling is another content of chemtrails is a form of nanotechnology. And I think it's nanotechnology that is actually generating those fibers that seem to have some kind of life that is in Morgellons disease. So yes, on that level, they're doing it because it's part of the destruction of human health. But I think also they are seeking to create a sub-reality in a way, or a sub-atmosphere around the planet on the level that we interact with. And I think that the chemtrails are part of that. And also they connect into HARP, which has the ability, I mean, you know, Bernard Eastland, who was the man who applied for the patent, for original patents for HARP, on behalf of a transnational corporation, he has said, he said at one point that HARP has the ability to put a energetic shield around the planet. And it seems that there are more and more efforts to manipulate the atmosphere, the sea in which we live. As I've said many times, if you want to affect all the fish, what do? You affect the sea. Well, we are living in a sea of energy. And if you can impact upon that sea, you impact upon anyone who is interacting with it. And again, we come back to this defense shield against the truth vibrations. They're trying everything they can to stop humans being impacted by them. And one of the ways that they are doing it is by attacking and manipulating the energy sea field that we interact with, so that it is suppressing our ability to open and expand. And I think chemtrails are part of that. I think HARP is definitely part of that. And another thing that I go into in this book, Remember Who You Are, which is about the mass culling of the population, but also about this whole energy shield, and that's what I call the radiation agenda. For years and years now, I've been ticking off more and more sources of radiation that humans are subjected to. And when I look, for instance, I met an Oxford Don in the 1990s called Kitty Little, Dr. Kitty Little, who had connections into British intelligence and stuff, and she had started to see that what I'm talking about now was real. And so I had a meeting with her, and she used to work for the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority. And so she was very, very expert in that whole area of nuclear power technology. And she told me then in the 1990s that the Rothschild family, who of course are fundamentally involved in this global conspiracy, were the force that led to the introduction of nuclear power. So now we have nuclear power stations all over the world, which are all potentially, catastrophic releases of radiation. And many of them are leaking like a sieve anyway. And so when I looked at what happened at Fukushima in Japan, it was just too much of a gift. That colossal release of radiation, which is still going on, was just too much of a gift for me to be an accident, or at least to accept it was an accident without further investigation. And I explain in the book that my feeling is that, and I put the evidence for it, and I'm not alone. There's other people that have come to the same conclusion, that actually Fukushima was blown up by small nuclear weapons, what are called gun-type nuclear weapons. It's interesting to note that Fukushima had a whole new so-called security and sensor system put in. And technology's continually getting smaller and lighter. Well, these bloody cameras at Fukushima that they put in the year before the explosion, they weighed 1,000 pounds. I mean, what, but when you put them together with a small gun-type nuclear weapon, and you take the casing off the nuclear weapon, I mean, they're ridiculously close to looking like each other. And then you realize that the firm that put them in was an Israeli company that's based at Dimona in Israel, which is the location of the Israeli massive nuclear weapons program. And after I'd come to these conclusions, there was a nuclear engineer called Arnie Gunderson who did a speech in Boston, I think it was. And it was an alert speech, because he said, we've realized that the explosion, or one of the explosions at Fukushima, has done something that should not be possible with a nuclear power station. It has in effect broken the speed of sound. It was a detonation speed wave, and a nuclear explosion caused by a nuclear power station alone should never ever cause a detonation speed wave. So his speech was, we realized that it is possible for a detonation speed wave to be caused by, well, maybe you haven't. Maybe you have identified a detonation speed wave because Fukushima was detonated, wasn't a natural explosion. And as a result of that, of course, the atmosphere of the world is being irradiated on a very large scale, and it's increasing every day. And I would not for a second be surprised to see more such Fukushima accidents, quote, in the years to come, because they clearly have a agenda to irradiate far more than ever has been the atmosphere of the Earth. And I think that one reason is that they want a situation where there's a dramatically reduced population. And of course, radiation will impact upon that, especially if it gets even more serious and powerful in the atmosphere, but also they know that there will be certain human genetic types that will mutate to be able to stand a greater amount of radiation, and they're the people or the genetic lines that they want to be around after this cull that they want has taken place, because it seems to me from my research over the years that these entities have a problem with our atmosphere, and they can live and need to live in a much more irradiated atmosphere, and I think they're trying to change the atmosphere as well to become more suitable for them. Mm-hmm. And I remember another very prophetic film I watched called The Arrival, starred a guy called Charlie Sheen. Came out I think in the early 90s, and the story was that this Charlie Sheen character realized that NASA was controlled by non-human entities who look human, and that they were changing the Earth's atmosphere so that they could come and outwardly experience or be here with an atmosphere that suited them. I think something like that's definitely happening.